He was braver than your usual rock star.
Was he a girl? Was he a boy? What was he thinking?
Nobody has ever broken the rules as he has.
David Bowie's unique talent made him an icon in the world of popular music. His fearless approach to everything from art and fashion to acting and sexual role-playing made him a rock and roll revolutionary. He battled social prejudice, personal tragedy, and even drug addiction.
I thought, who are you? What have you become?
But his key to survival was almost constant change.
He could reinvent himself every couple of years, but if he didn't make great records, people wouldn't be interested.
David's role has been monumental in expanding the concept of what a pop star or a rock star or an entertainer can be.
David Bowie began his wildly unconventional life in an ordinary working-class London neighborhood. For the conservative post-war residents of Brixton, playing by the rules was the key to success. But by rejecting conformity, David Bowie would ironically become Brixton's most famous native son.
Now Ziggy played guitar.
The creator of rock and roll spaceman Ziggy Stardust arrived on Earth on January the 8th, 1947. He started life as David Robert Jones, and though his given name was fairly run-of-the-mill, the household he grew up in was far from conventional. His parents, Hayward Jones and Peggy Burns, were unmarried. David was the couple's first child together, and each of them already had other children from previous relationships. In fact, it wasn't until David was 8 months old that Hayward and Peggy were wed. David's mother was an assertive, no-nonsense woman who worked part-time as a movie theater usherette. David's father once harbored his own show business aspirations. His first wife had been a singer, but his efforts to launch her career had failed. By the time David came along, Hayward Jones had become a public relations man for an orphanage.
His father was a small, quiet, quite studious man, very gentle, very sweet. I never heard him raise his voice. His mother, she was a little sterner.
I know he loved his father very much, and he was probably closer to his father than to his mother.
David also shared a strong bond with his half-brother Terry Burns.
Terry was a real big brother to David. He was a bright guy. They had a lovely symbiotic relationship. Terry was very much his best friend, and he loved him very much.
David idolized his brother. Terry was David's protector, and often helped his shy little brother cope with a dark cloud that hung over the Jones family. A number of their mother's relatives suffered from schizophrenia. Some had been institutionalized. Others had committed suicide.
It's been fairly well recorded that my family is pretty rampantly, what's the word? I'm not so sure how much of it is madness. I think that there's an awful lot of emotional and spiritual mutilation goes on in my family.
The specter of mental illness haunted young David and was rarely discussed outside the Jones home. Although he didn't fully understand the ongoing problem, David felt it made him different from other children. In 1956, 9-year-old David lost daily contact with his brother when Terry enlisted in the Royal Air Force. A year later, the Jones family moved to the London suburb of Bromley, where David soon made new friends.
He was always a great thinker and a great worker out of things. And he was a neat, tidy little boy, the kind of boy that Mum likes you to bring home.
The well-behaved youngster quickly fit into the suburban setting and joined a local Boy Scout troop.
Soon after we'd enrolled, we started talking about music straight away.
David loved all things American, especially the country's latest export, rock and roll.
We were listening to the stuff that was out and that shocked our parents. Elvis Presley, Fats Domino, and Little Richard.
Ready, set, go man, go!
Little Richard was different from every other performer on the music scene. His androgynous, almost effeminate looks and sexually suggestive lyrics made him more outlandish and more subversive than any of his contemporaries. Young David Jones found the combination both fascinating and inspiring.
I wanted to be a white Little Richard at 8, or at least his sax player.
David had already sort of prepared himself for fame, you know, even when I met him at 9, you know, he was kind of already going that direction.
In 1958, David began attending Bromley Technical School, where art was his favourite subject. Soon after, his brother Terry returned from military service. He shared with 11-year-old David his newfound love for the Beat Poets and Jack Kerouac's iconic tale of nonconformity, On the Road. He also gave David a taste of what life was like outside of middle-class Bromley.
Terry was the one who took him to London for the first time and played a role in introducing him to different forms of music.
Terry showed David London's bohemian Soho district, where they listened to jazz and rhythm and blues acts in nightclubs. Before long, David was making music of his own by taking up the guitar and the saxophone.
I wanted to be a musician because it seemed rebellious, it seemed subversive.
David also began experimenting with his look.
His appearance was always a little bit out of the way from the point of view of normal school dress. His hair was always light and cut short.
David was into fads. I mean, they might only last a few days or even hours.
Although David prided himself on being a maverick, he was just like many boys when it came to the opposite sex. A crush on a girl named Carol led to a brawl with his best friend.
My fist and his face made contact, should we say. Unfortunately, caused a bit of damage to his eye, and that was not the intention at all.
David was rushed to the hospital, where doctors feared he might lose the sight in his left eye. It took 3 operations to repair the damage. Though surgeons were able to prevent blindness, David's pupil remained permanently dilated. As a result, he appeared to have eyes that were different colours.
Later on, David said to me, I did him a favour. So, I mean, a lot of people think it's quite an interesting thing to have 2 different coloured eyes.
The injury kept David out of school for 3 months. And during that time, his feelings of being an outsider became more intense.
I felt often, ever since I was a teenager, so adrift and so not part of everyone else, with so many dark secrets about my family in the cupboard, that it kind of made me feel very much on the outside of everything.
But rather than dwelling on his feelings of alienation, David threw himself even further into music. Though he loved rock and roll, he also enjoyed listening to show tunes performed by cabaret singer Anthony Newley.
When I was a teenager, I sincerely wanted to write musicals for the West End and for Broadway.
The music was David's greatest passion. He also loved clothes, and the more outrageous, the better.
I would be a mod walking around Bromley in my mod clothes, and he would be an arty type walking around in his art school type clothes with his art school chums.
We used to walk around Bromley trying pulling as many birds as we could, thinking that we were God's gift, talking about being famous.
By 1962, a new group called the Beatles was creating waves in Britain, and 15-year-old David set out to make some noise of his own. That summer, the budding rocker began testing his talent in a series of bands. His first, the Conrads, covered pop tunes and lasted about a year. He and friend George Underwood next formed an R&B group, the King Bees. With David now calling himself Davy Jones, the band even cut a single. It went nowhere. When the King Bees broke up soon after, George Underwood set his sights on becoming a graphic artist. But David was devastated by the split.
He said, it's all right for you, you've got your art. For me, this is my life. I know what he meant. It's like sort of, he'd committed himself and he's got to go, there's no turning back.
With the Beatles' invasion of America and the growing popularity of Britain's newest sensation, the Rolling Stones, David was even more determined to find fame as a musician.